The people who are the most idealistic and most naive and most ignorant, they're the ones who think that if you put a whole bunch of children on an island without the, the toxicity of adults and white supremacy and colonialism and blah, 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 okay, and progress, if you put all these kids on an island, you're going to get utopia. And I hate to burst your bubble. You put them all on the island, you're going to get Lord of the Flies.
I was just going to say Lord of the Flies, yeah.
Exactly. And if you don't know that reference, then you're part of the problem. Google Lord of the Flies.
Hello and welcome to Awake at the Wheel. So recently there's been a lot in the news about cell phone bans in classrooms. So in Ontario where we live, there's been restrictions since 2019 on cell phone usage in classrooms, but across Canada and in many states in the US, they're instituting full-on bans. So to me, it seemed like it was a no-brainer as far as, well, yeah, cell phones are disruptive and, why didn't this happen sooner? But I'm surprised to see that there's actually quite a bit of debate in favor of the ban as well as against the ban. One would presume that it's mostly the students that are against it, but there's also some parents who have qualms about their child not being able to have their cell phone in class. So the obvious things that come to mind here, and even with the Ontario regulations that are in place, cell phones can still be used if it's for educational purposes or for medical purposes. I would even say for myself, I use my cell phone as an assistive device. So of course that would still be allowed in the classroom. But there's a lot of problems with kids being on their phones, not paying attention in class. Again, the things that I would think are obvious problems with cell phones in the classroom. But as far as, whether it should be a full-on ban or not, I guess that's where the debate is. And it's funny because I think back to when I was in high school, and when I was in grade 12, I would say is when cell phones became a thing. There was me and two other friends who had our flip phones, and the rule was it stays in your locker. So I'm also perplexed as to why and when that changed and how that evolved, because the argument is often, well, what if there's an emergency? Well, then go to your locker and get your phone and use it. Why that changed, I'm not sure. But Oren, what are your thoughts on all this?
Well, as you say, it should be a no-brainer for a variety of reasons, many of which we've talked about in other podcasts. And so this whole idea, so I can think of a few reasons why parents inexplicably would want the cell phone to be with their kids. So one would be, as you say, for emergencies, but there's always ways around that. If the child's having an emergency, the school will be able to contact the parents or whatever, or they'll have access to it. It's, if the parents have to reach the child, well, then you call the school, right? To expect that I can call my kid right then and there. It's like, it doesn't make sense. Kids have breaks. There's, periods or 45 minutes or an hour or whatever. Between the periods, they can check if they, if something about a kid having to pick up their sibling or whatever else like that, right? These things can happen, there's times for them to be able to do that. And the frequency of such necessity is probably relatively rare. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, it doesn't justify all the downsides, as you say, the disruption. So I've got right now, one daughter is in high school. The other two have already graduated, but they went through as well. And we've seen the progression or regression when it comes to cell phones. And sure enough, with each year, the cell phones are being used more adaptively by kids to cheat. It's, it's much easier, to cheat on these tests, especially when COVID and people were doing everyone I knew, whether it was my, my kids' friends, not my kids, but the kids' friends, or my own students would admit to me about how easy it is to cheat and so on. So, that's just human nature. Most people, given that opportunity, not everyone, but most people, they're going to take advantage of it. So if you're giving kids this device, this powerful device that we've never had in the history of humanity, and it can do all these amazing things, whether it's to cheat, whether it's to communicate with somebody, whether it's to spread gossip, or, or whether it's to distract yourself, to think that kids won't do all of that if given the opportunity is ridiculous. You're defying the human condition. So I can't, so it's rationalization if you think of any reason for why the kids should have it. Now, the newest reason, and I get it, and I'm not sure what to do about this, is that especially since COVID, so many kids have used their phones to expose things happening in school that
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be happening. Okay, like indoctrination, for example, teachers engaging in terrible transgressions and so on. So I get that. So it's a bit tricky. How does one, how do we account for that? I'm not quite sure. Does it mean having cameras in all the schools, in all the classrooms and something like that, so that if necessary, you can go in and check it out? Possibly, is it expensive? Yes, but if that's what's required, if that's what it takes to prevent kids from being distracted by these devices, I mean, adults, check, I don't care what laws are in place, check any city at any given time, you're going to see a bunch of adults still on their phones while driving. Okay, while driving. And if adults can't contain themselves and they've got their brains fully formed while driving or in a business meeting or something else, okay, why would we expect kids to be able to?
Yeah. And the cheating part, I almost feel naive, but that didn't even occur to me. Like, that's such an obvious one that, yeah, it's such a huge tool for cheating. And again, why that's not being policed more effectively is very strange to me. I think back to, gosh, we're talking 20-ish years ago now, when I was considering a legal career and I was doing my LSAT. And I remember for the LSAT examination, when we got there, we had to drop off in a bin our phones, no water bottles with a label even on it, anything that could possibly have any method of cheating. I think I had to take my watch off too, and it was like a Timex piece of crap watch. Like, what am I going to do with it? But like, it was zero tolerance, no possibility of cheating whatsoever. So to me, in my head, that's, the way it is. But yeah, for kids to just have access to their phones and probably very easily be able to cheat with that just blows my mind that hasn't been more stringently and effectively addressed these days. It's wild.
Yeah. And, kids, as generations go on, kids are getting access to more information. So kids are learning from a younger age, how to be devious, and B, they are being told, and I'm telling you right now, this might blow your mind, but I've over the last 20 to 30 years, and I've tracked the change, having taught for that long and having been in grad school as well, for a long period of time, the general sentiment. Okay. And I know we're sort of shifting away from the cell phones in class, but as part of it, it's related, which is this idea that it's normal to cheat. Okay.
Yeah.
And we talked before in other podcasts about accountability. Okay. It's almost like a game. All right. It's like investors. It's like corrupt business people. If I do all these bad practices and I can make $10 billion and I'm fined $100,000, it's worth it. The cost benefit analysis makes sense. So for these kids, if I do something and the advantage is I get an A or an A plus and I don't have to study that hard, etc., and the worst thing that's going to happen to me is, a warning. Okay, kids don't get suspended for this anymore. Kids don't get a 0 on the test. Most schools, and I can't speak for all districts, but I know there are many schools that have these policies. You're not allowed to give a 0 even if the kid cheats. They're supposed to have a chance to make up the test. It can't be a harder test. It has to be like on par. All these things. So the risk is so minimal and the payoff can be so great. And again, we're giving kids the means. And in the old days, as you said about all these things about to prevent cheating, right? Well, the most common thing, and again, I've taught over 200 class courses over the years, and I know when students would go to the bathroom. All right. I would have a TA or something monitor. We can't go in the stall with them, and I know students, and they would even tell me, they had the paper all whatever, and they quietly open it up and everything. Well, if you got a phone and it's not taken off of you and you go to the bathroom, you've got everything right there. Okay. Or at your desk. Okay.
And Oren, I don't know, maybe it's this illness I'm fighting off, so I'm just more sensitive right now. But of all the, almost 50 episodes we've done and 50 topics we've talked about, what you said there probably made me the saddest. The fact that people aren't holding themselves to a baseline of ethical behavior, right? That the fact that the enticement of cheating and getting the benefit out of cheating is far more, again, enticing than doing the right thing and being ethical. Like, I just want to throw my hands up and say, well, there's nothing left to talk about here, because that's very sad, very, very sad. But you're right. And that's the issue here, is that if we're not policing things with proper consequences, and this goes across many of the topics we've talked about, if there aren't proper consequences, what is going to deter people from behaving badly?
Yeah, I mean, that's just the reality. That's the human condition. And Scott Adams, I think I've cited him before, the creator
Mm-hmm.
of Dilbert. This is his phrase. He says, design is destiny. I might have mentioned that before.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are designing a system that's guaranteeing that kids are going to cheat. It's guaranteed because A, it's so easy. B, the consequences are minimal. C, it's being normalized.
Mm-hmm.
And D, the payoff is worth it. Under that system, it's impossible for the kids not to either cheat or have a lower moral code or not put as much effort or something. I mean, Chat GPT is going to change all that as well. I mean, it's all technology. Technology is great, but technology also has the potential to be terrible.
Yeah.
And again, that's where policing comes in. And I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent here, but it's related, and it's related to other videos we've done, which is when we have such changes in society, in this case through technology, we do need, use the word policing, we do need some type of system or structure in place to make sure that it doesn't have the unintended negative consequences that we're talking about. And unfortunately, as we've talked about in other podcasts, so many people in that position of authority or control or decision making have been asleep at the wheel. Hence our podcast, Awake at the Wheel. And it's no more so than in schools. We see it now. I'm not maligning all teachers, and we've talked about this in other podcasts where the good teachers,
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones who come to us because they're so distressed.
Yeah.
They're seeing their profession, they're seeing decaying. They're seeing people at the top either closing their eyes, burying their heads in the sand, or encouraging it, okay, for some crazy reason. And, and again, I don't want to get into another rant, so I'll be careful. But the fact is that so many people in these positions of power, A, they've been brought up through let's say, the teachers' college system, through the education system, with beliefs that are nonsensical, and they are not conducive to a healthy, power, like let's say properly functioning society where there is accountability, where I don't care what the color of your skin is. I don't care what your sex is. I don't care what adversities you've had. I don't care what your sexual orientation or gender identity is. I don't care any of that. If you've, committed a transgression, you need to be held accountable. Conversely, you need to feel that it's your responsibility as a human being for yourself to do things the right way. Okay, not to take shortcuts, but to struggle, to endeavor to do better and to become a better human being for yourself. For society, great, but at least for yourself. And there are so many people, unfortunately, who are distorting that message, preventing it from being from coming out, and instead are giving the wrong message. Okay, which is basically, if you've done something wrong, well, let's look at all the reasons that society wronged you, as opposed to what did you do wrong. Okay, and again, these messages are spreading so widely, and kids are seeing this all the time through social media. So I'm just trying to tie it together with the phone,
Mm-hmm.
and the phones are the ones that that carry or transmit that social media messaging.
And as I always do, I'm trying to find some positive hope here as far as society and people wanting to do good and be good. In one of these videos that I watched about the cell phone ban, there was actually a kid who said that he's happy about it because he doesn't feel that he has the ability to control his usage in class and to stay on task and to stay focused. So on the one hand, I think that that's a great thing that this kid's able to recognize his perhaps gaps in self-control. But on the other hand, that's really scary that kids feel so addicted to their phones that they can see loud and clear they don't have control over it. They don't have power over their usage. And, what is that going to do to these kids long term from a learning perspective?
Right. And I think we've talked about this in other podcasts, but one of the best, this has been for 50 or 60 years, was the marshmallow test. Okay. And I think I've talked about it before, but it's worth saying it again because this ties to all of this. That and there's different variations, but just imagine, I'll just make it with people can understand. If you have a kid where you go, okay, you know what? If you act right now, you can have these 5 Smarties. Or if you wait 10 minutes, you can have 50 Smarties. The kid who's able, from the age of 4 or 5 or even younger, the kid who's able to go, whoa, I'm not going to take this, the short-term gain. I'm going to wait a little bit longer and get a bigger gain, right? Those kids, the ones who have impulse control, the ability to delay gratification. We know the research is clear and it's being replicated so many times that predicts success later in life, the ability to delay gratification. And cell phones are the antithesis of that.
Yeah.
It's immediate gratification right then and there, whether it's to contact somebody, whether it's to get information, or whether it's to distract yourself, or to, when you're distracting yourself. And this is something else that's so important people have to understand. I think I've said in another podcast, which is, yeah, I'm pretty sure I did, that when you're distracting yourself, when you're externalizing your attention, you are doing something that differentiates humans from most other creatures on the planet, which is the ability to introspect, to look inward, to reflect on your thoughts, your feelings, your experiences, the world around you, and just to, to learn from that, to benefit from it, to play things out in your mind. We're not doing that, and that's one of the most integral components of humanity. That that we have this ability to do that. We don't know how we can do it, but we can do this, to mentalize and so on. And the cell phones, it's not preventing us from doing it, but it's preventing us from developing the capacity. It's preventing us from feeling comfortable in doing that. And I think I said this before, but I'm going to say it again. Mm-hmm. Okay. I've had so many patients who they're workaholics. Now, there's different reasons for workaholics, but the most dangerous, I've heard so many people say this, it's not to get ahead in life. It's not to achieve their goals. It's not for fulfillment. It's to run away from their thoughts. That's the only reason they're doing it, because they're terrified of, right? Okay. And again, with cell phones, that allows people to do that in some of the most harmful ways. And there's so many other, like, we can go on and on and on about this, but I'll curb my rant. But the point is, okay, truly, adults have a hard enough time doing that now, but kids are not even developing the capacity from a young age, because parents from a younger and younger time are giving kids distractions, the cell phone, the iPads, or whatever. So kids immediately are doing this. They're externalizing. I called this out about 15, 20 years ago because I saw it starting to happen. Okay. And I said, it's only going to get worse. Mm-hmm. And we need that, because that's one of the reasons kids' mental health is deteriorating. So, and there's so many factors. We've talked about many of them in other podcasts. Okay. But again, that inability to self-regulate, to slow things down on your own, to reflect, to think about things, to decide, maybe I did this wrong. Maybe I could do this better. Maybe this person is not my friend. To be able to do all of this in a controlled, slower, manner. Okay. We're robbing them of that capability, and that's terrifying.
Yeah. And I can't remember the terminology that's used, but I've been seeing a lot of content about like these exact kids, the ones who have been raised like from infancy on their iPads and on phones, and just the behavioral challenges that come along with it. And the videos that I've watched are kind of, to be comical, but as a psychotherapist watching it, it's really, really concerning to see the complete lack of self-regulation that these individuals have, because they were robbed of the opportunity to develop that skill, because at the first sign of discomfort, they're being handed a distraction. They're being handed something that allows them to not deal with what they're feeling and experiencing.
Right. It's like it's a techno pacifier. Okay.
Yeah.
But the difference is, even with the pacifier, at least the kid, even though it soothes them,
they're still with their thoughts.
Yes. Right. But it totally distracts them from that. And again, I'm telling you right now, when we talk about this, so many people today, and we've talked about this in other podcasts, the overdiagnosis of ADHD or ADD. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, whether people have it or not, we are kind of making people more susceptible to that. Again, because I keep saying this over and over, the need to slow things down. That's why, in therapy, one of the first things I teach people is proper breathing, because when you do that, you're regulating your system. I tell everybody, look, everything that we do, everything we experience, the world around us, it all gets filtered through the brain. And if we're jacking that brain up on steroids, so to speak, with all this technology, blue light, novelty, always, okay, that's not healthy. And we've talked before about getting that reset, going outside, looking at the sky, putting your hands in the ground. Okay. I mean, there's physiological changes that happen when you do these things. And it's necessary. Now, I just went on vacation a few weeks ago, and I'm saying from now on, when we go, and I was telling my wife this because it happened last time that we took a vacation, the room just happened to have an ocean view. Okay. Mm-hmm. So when we were selecting hotels, I said, it has to have an ocean view. Okay, because I know what it does to me. And when I go to my mother who lives out in the countryside, okay, and I'm sitting in one of the rooms and I'm just looking at all those trees or her pond or whatever, okay, I can physically feel the reset. I tell my kids that all the time. I say, look at Nanas, look at the sky, look at the stars, just sit there for 5 minutes, at least. Okay. And I do that all the time. And it's rejuvenating, and we're robbing. And we've talked about this on other podcasts. You can do this. You don't need to go to the country. You don't need to go to, to the Bahamas or whatever. You can do it anywhere outside. But kids are, not being told that. Yeah. You want to see the ocean? Bring it up on the screen. Okay. Have it like, that's the wrong thing. The electronics are not a substitute for nature, because as these technological advances have only been around for like a couple of generations to this degree. Right? Humans have been around for hundreds of thousands of years, and our brains have been programmed a certain way in sync with nature. These things, this is how we regulate. This is how we have better mental health. This is how we self-soothe, etc. And again, parents are failing their kids if they don't allow them to do that. Parents are taking the easy way out. Okay, they're using it again. It's like a pacifier. It's like the remote control for TVs. And again, people were saying, "Oh, you're worried too much about this," and there was a lot of hyperbole over the harms of TV. But the fact is, there were some harms, and this is beyond that, because again, TV was in one place, one location, only a certain amount of time. There's only a certain amount of things you can watch before. Oh my God, it's so boring. With the cell phone, it's constant, it's right there, it's ever present, and there's novelty literally any moment. Like, you can find novelty any moment, and that's what the brain seeks, is novelty.
And I've read that some teens are using their phones up to 16 hours a day. Like, I can't even comprehend that. Like, when is anything else getting accomplished or being done? And in their defense, and even in the defense of parents, I think that we do find ourselves in a unique time as far as the advances in technology, but also let's not forget the role that the pandemic played and lockdowns. And this was the only way that a large number, really all kids, were able to communicate with each other, whether it was through the classroom, whether it was after school. All they had was technology. And, in our adult lives, 3 years is not as significant as a developing child or teen who this was, at a foundational time in their life where they learned, well, this is how we communicate. We do it on our phone. We do it on the computer. So that's going to be something really difficult to break. And I think that we're now starting to see the true negative impact that that's having.
Yeah, and I'm sure we talked about another podcast. I'm sorry, that's going to be the drinking game word to say. I'm sure we talked about another podcast. And this has been known for many years, and I think people need to really watch. Was it The Social Network? Was it? I want to make sure I get the right one, because there was two. There was one that was the story behind Facebook, okay? Yeah. But then there was the one that was just came out a couple of years ago that was a dramatized version of social media in general, okay? And they were talking. I think I hope maybe we'll put in the description in. And I forget the name of the person, one of the people behind it, but he was on a lot of talk shows, went on podcasts, and he really articulated the dangers we're talking about so well. And he knows better than we do, because that's his job. Like, he was in it. And the most famous thing that's been going around is all those people in Silicon Valley, all the tech developers and so on. If they had kids, they would not let their kids have a smartphone. That's all you need to know. Okay. They refused to let their kids have smartphones. They had to have the most basic flip phones, because they knew what they were creating. It's like someone, right? It's like someone who's making a meal and saying, you know what, you guys can eat it. I won't eat it. I won't let my kids eat it, but you can have it. Okay. Yeah. Like, you have to question why that is. So people really have to understand that. And this is not hyperbole. I like to use media, like usually movies, songs, shows, whatever, with my patients, because it's easier to see our own lives through the lens of others. Mm-hmm. And so we can connect with this. And because when we're talking about ourselves, our defenses are up. When we're watching a movie, the defenses are down, and something can resonate. So I'm going to say all these movies were made in the last, let's say, 20 years at least, and before as well, but about like virtual reality, about people opting not to engage in real life, but rather through, these virtual realities. Okay. Actually, even 15 years ago, or 25, 30 years ago, and much more as well. Right. And it's becoming more and more of a reality that more and more people, whether it's about, I can go to the temples in Egypt or whatever, or I can just, look at it on my phone, or the pyramids. Okay. I can look at it on my phone and get the same thing, or with VR or whatever. Right. That's one thing. But let's take it one step further, and it is happening, and we know it's happening, and this is leading the charge with AI and everything. It's going to be connectedness. People are going to opt for an AI girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, or friend. Okay. And whether it's physical, AI, like physical robots, or whether it's just like, chat GPT and so on, more and more people are doing that, thinking that it's easier, it's just as effective, it's just as, as rewarding and fulfilling. And it's not. Once again, it might seem that way, right? But the reality is our brains are programmed, and evolution doesn't change that quickly. We need that contact. We need that eye to eye, face to face and everything. Even on screen time, it's not bad, but it's not the same. We know physiologically as being in the person's presence. This has effects on our neurology. As I said earlier, everything filters through the brain. So if we're making all these changes, it's like giving somebody, simulated food. It might taste great or whatever, but if there's absolutely no calories and no protein and no nutrition or whatever, we're not getting what we need from it. And it's the same with all these virtual variations of the stuff that we used to be doing, whether it's, again, connectedness, going somewhere, whatever else like that. We are robbing ourselves of what makes us human.
Yeah. And we were talking before about justification. And I think that perhaps in part there is some justification of using technology more for communication, because we also are hearing a lot about young folks being a lot more anxious and socially anxious. So I think that there's some level of justification, because having this, screen between us rather than being face to face in physical presence does reduce a little bit of the anxiety that they may be experiencing. So they justify it by saying, well, this is better. This is better because it feels better. But people don't forget that the more you avoid something that makes you anxious, the more anxious it's going to make you when you are in that actual situation. So while on the face of it, and while immediately it may feel good, long term, it's not.
Right. And not only does it make you feel more anxious, but you're also less capable. So that fuels the anxiety as well, because right, you're not functioning. And I've lost count of the number of people who said, you know what, we had this great, we spoke online for 2 months every day. It was, it was great, the chemistry, whatever. And then we met and the person was nothing like they were online. It's a different dynamic. And yes, and once, and I'm going to go back to what we said earlier, which is going back to kids and everything. I mean, this is affecting adults, and some adults who grew up without this technology first, and it still affects them. But if that's all that you've known, right? The fact is, it's up to the adults in the room. Teachers, politicians, policymakers, doctors, psychologists, psychotherapists, everyone. It's up to us to establish a structure and to make that structure, let's say, most adaptive for kids, because without that external, I've said this before, without that external structure, kids don't learn to, the structure and stability and security and so on. The kids don't learn to internalize that, and kids don't learn to, again, to create that internalized structure. The ability to monitor, to regulate, to modulate your feelings, yourself in a situation. Okay, we need people in charge, and so many parents, whatever else, they rationalize it. But they're doing it like, oh, we're letting kids become their own selves and blah blah blah, and we don't want to interfere. No, you are lying to yourself. You are failing in your job. Your job is not to be authoritarian. It's not to control and dominate, but it's to put that structure in place. And I think I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. The people who are the most idealistic and most naive and most ignorant, they're the ones who think that if you put a whole bunch of children on an island without the toxicity of adults and white supremacy and colonialism and blah, 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 okay, and progress, if you put all these kids on an island, you're going to get utopia. And I hate to burst your bubble. You put them all on the island, you're going to get Lord of the Flies.
I was just going to say Lord of the Flies. Yep.
Exactly. And if you don't know that reference, then you're part of the problem. Google Lord of the Flies. Okay.
Yeah. Kids rely on the adults in the situation to provide structure and guidance, and being over permissive is just as bad as, if not worse, than being overly authoritarian.
Yeah, and we've talked about that in other podcasts. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. And again, the research is pretty clear. Now, I crap all over research because there's a lot of research that's bad. A lot of it's not replicated. But the stuff that we're saying, when we say this with such confidence, is because this has been replicated over and over and over and over. Yeah. And it's you can't deny it. Okay.
Yeah. So thinking back to this whole cell phone ban, I'm really racking my brain as we're talking here of, okay, so they banned cell phones in classrooms. We've obviously identified a lot of the reasons this is a great idea, but I'm wondering, can you think of anything that kids are going to miss out on without having their phones in the classroom? With, again, the exception of those who need it for medical reasons and so on and so forth. Those kids will obviously still have access to it. But I'm really at a loss here as far as, like, is there going to be anything negative that comes out of this?
Realistically, no.
Mm-hmm.
The negative is what the people in charge, supposedly in charge, it's how they frame it and make the
Yeah.
kids think that there's a negative. What?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not getting immediate access with today's fast changing world and everything.
Mm-hmm.
We need information right away. Okay. No. What you need to be able to do is to be able to tolerate the discomfort that comes with not getting your needs satisfied right away, being able to delay gratification. That's so anything that you might lose out on, supposedly, I think of the benefits that you get from not doing that. And again, being a better functioning person. And the evidence is clear. Again, I know there's so many other factors, but the fact that so many kids today are, again, the highest levels of anxiety, depression, stress, sleeplessness, social anxiety. So, lack of self-advocacy, self-agency, feeling that I have, I'm a nothing in this world and everything like that. Okay. A big part of it is the cell phones. It's undeniable. So I think that, again, that taking it away and we're not talking about for a whole day. We're talking about between, in these periods and teaching children, sorry, for this next 45-minute block, you need to be able to sit down, focus on what's going on around you. Okay. And yes, do a lot of teachers suck? Yes. Okay. A lot of teachers are terrible. They don't do their best to keep the kids' interested or whatever. I get that. But guess what? That's what a lot of life is like. And again, if a child can't sit there, and I'm telling you right now, and again, we've seen this in so many contexts. Okay. If a child can't do that for 45 minutes in a class, how do you expect them to go into a job and do something that requires sustained concentration? Okay. And again, adults themselves, 40, 50 years old, we're watching them. They're at their job or whatever. They can't help but go to their phone and check, right? Adults are doing this who haven't been raised this way. How are kids going to be able to function? You can't be constantly distracted. You need to be grounded. You need to be able to focus on the present, on the reality around you. And again, we talked about the introspection. It's not just about that. Again, it's being present here. And it's a cliche, I know, and we've been talking about this before, and I hate to say it, but go to any restaurant, go to any food court, go to any schoolyard, go to any park, and watch the young people around. And it's not even young people, older people as well, right?
Yep.
In almost every case, you get a circle of friends, they're all on their damn phones.
Yeah.
Every single one of them. Okay. It's just, it's taken away from the present.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about, again, drawbacks of doing this in the classroom. In the immediate, no, of course, I think overall it's going to be a good thing. But I do wonder if we're likening this to addiction, there's probably going to be some level of withdrawal then that we're seeing. And I think that unless the consequences are consistent for kids breaking this rule, I don't think this is going to stick, nor is it going to be effective.
Well, yeah, and I think I said in another podcast, about this withdrawal that you're saying. I think I said that a number of years ago, I may have mentioned it, but they did a study with adults. This was before cell phones became this ubiquitous, that literally, I think it was like within one day without their cell phones, and they had access to regular phones, they had access to their computer, but they couldn't have access to their cell phone. Within one day, a large proportion of the people started showing signs of withdrawal. Okay. They were twitching. They were anxious. They were having headaches even. Right. And so, yes, so there will be some withdrawal, but better to do it now, help wean them off, so to speak. Because again, we're not saying take it away forever. We're saying being able to learn to live for blocks of time without this access. And by the way, there's a whole bunch of people, the transhuman movement, where they're saying, no, this is good. This is the next step to our next stage of evolution, cyborgs. Okay. And you know what? The phones essentially is like being like a cyborg. We have all this access to information and we can do all these amazing things. And next is going to be the glasses. Like you'll be, they tried that with Google before with the Google glasses. This is coming up. Okay. Because all these different companies are, using these technologies. And they're calling it enhancing our experience. Yes. And so we are becoming like cyborgs. Yeah. So I don't know where this is all going to go. And I'm going to be that old person who's going to say, no, I'm old school. Okay. I am going to talk to real human beings. I'm not, I'm not going to rely on AI and so on. So I might be that one person who's still, who's going to be left behind. I'm going to be the Luddite. But this is not just about, technology is supposed to enhance our experience.
Yes.
Okay. I get it. But I can see, and anyone else who knows about the human condition, and we're talking about this, can see that for all the enhancements, it's also detracting from, again, the human condition. And again, and I love technology, right? I love my VR. I like my phone and my computer and everything else like that. I love that. But I'm watching children changing in front of our eyes. And we talked about this in another podcast with all these kids being entitled and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if people would watch that, they would see that they are, they're having exposure to so many influences that are not their parents, not good influences. It's their own peers. And we know that peer influence is much more powerful than virtually anything else. And when you're exposed to it all the time on this phone, okay, and it's mostly toxic messages, what do you expect? What kind of kids do you think we're going to be producing?
Yeah, exactly. And I'll echo that too, right? I love technology. As far as my visual impairment's concerned, it's enhanced my life so much. I would say if I had this level of impairment 30 years ago, I wouldn't be able to function the way that I do now without technology. So obviously, yeah, technology can play a significant role in people's lives. But I think that the big tool that people need to begin to develop and refine is understanding that difference between where something good enhances your life, but then where that line is where it starts detracting, as you said. So I think that, yeah, certainly if we're implementing this in schools right now, hopefully by the time these kids are adults, they'll be able to have that ability and skill refined. My concern lies within a lot of what you said there, as far as, there's a lot of toxic stuff that's happening at school, during school, after school, and when they have access to it all day long, that obviously is quite problematic. I am curious to see what role the ban of cell phones will play, perhaps in making it be more like when we were kids. I think back to, at least when there was bullying back then, at the end of the day, it was over. Obviously, it won't be the same because they will still have access to their phones, but I am curious to see what role this might play in cyberbullying and some of the toxic behavior that's happening, because it won't be as constant as it is currently.
Right. And I just want to add one more layer. It's funny because I used to talk about all the time with bullying. I say, if you could make it home, at least you had some respite. Okay. You had like 12 hours or whatever. But no, whether it's a phone, whether it's a computer, it's always there. But here's the thing. One more thing about the addictiveness of it. Whether you've sent a message to somebody and you're waiting to hear back from them, or whether you're in some kind of conflict, okay, or whether you think that people are gossiping about you or something like that, okay, when you feel that your own well-being, your safety, whatever it is, your status, in a group is at risk, okay, you're constantly checking. That's normal because you're so anxious. Oh my God, I need to know, okay, and it can be something trivial. And I've had so many patients who are adults who they're embarrassed. They go, I can't believe it. I sent out a text and I'm like a kid just waiting for the person to respond. Did they respond? And they keep looking. That's the human condition for most people. And again, the ability to self-regulate, to show restraint, to be able to go, I do want to look. I want to see if they responded. It's not time sensitive. So it's not an emergency. Okay. Can I hold off and not check every 30 seconds or something like that? And I've been caught up in that as well. If I'm waiting for an important email or something like that, okay, I'm checking. Okay. And I have to catch myself. It's again, when it's always there, it's so hard to be mindful of that, because it's part of the environment. It's just, again, so it's just people who watch who look at their watch or who clock watch or whatever. Same thing. Once it becomes a habit, it's so hard not to do. So I'm kind of jumping the gun here, but at the end, we always talk about what can people do about it. Well, as a parent, try to instill these things into as a kid. But before then, whether you're an adolescent, whether you're the adult yourself, trying to instill it in yourself. And we talked before about this. Sorry. Okay, with my thing where I try, not to go on to X first thing in the morning. Right. Okay, because right. So trying to have little things in place, and so and kids are gonna have to learn this as well. We need baby steps. We can't just put an outright ban and say, okay, you're quitting cold turkey. That's too much of a shock to the system. So helping people recognize that it's not punishment, it's not punitive, it's not bad. This is for your own good, which no kid likes to hear that, but it's a reality. And for ourselves as adults, we need to, not because we're being forced to do it as an adult, okay, but that we're saying, I just recognize that I am not in control of my own mind if I'm quickly checking, if I'm reflexively checking and so on. I need to try to put on restraint. And again, I'm not going to do it cold turkey. I'm going to ease my way into it, graduated approach to trying to more and more disengage from my device. Okay. And again, self-restraint, self-control, delayed gratification, impulse control, all of that, is necessary to be a successful person. We know this, the research is clear, and we need children to be able to feel that way as well. And to know that when I'm doing all of these things, I'm not anxious. At first it might be uncomfortable, but as you and I always say, we're trying to help people learn to be able to be more comfortable with the discomfort, or to tolerate the discomfort. And that's one of the most important skills, traits, capacities that somebody can develop. Because if you can't do that, you're not functioning nearly as well as people who can.
Yeah. Yeah. And my recommendations as far as what people can do completely echo that, as far as setting predictable structure and control over your devices. Don't let your devices control you. You are the one that controls them, and you control your usage and how much and how little, and so on and so forth. And as far as what parents can do to help prepare their kids for these inevitable bans, would be exactly what you said, setting that structure around it, setting parameters around it. And I would even say having household rules surrounding devices. And we spoke about this before in another episode. But having dinner time without devices, I think, is one of the best things that people can do. And I get it. I run a business. I have my phone on me all the time. There's important stuff that comes in, but rarely is there going to be an emergency between 6 o'clock and 6:30. It can wait, because that's family time. A half an hour isn't a lot, but it is enough insofar as being able to develop a habit that sticks and prioritizes time together and time in the present, and not time on your device.
Right. And just look, and when we're doing this, have patience with the kids, because it's really a big ask that we're doing with these kids if they've been raised with these kinds of devices. And for ourselves, have self-compassion, because I'm telling you right now, I know I fail at many times in many ways to put those restrictions, whether it's my phone or my laptop, if I'm working on my book or something like that, and I get into it, and I'm with my family, extended family, and I'm doing it, and I know it pisses people off. So I have to recognize that, and we can't shame ourselves, because if we shame is the worst emotion. It's disempowering. Okay. So we can be embarrassed. We can be upset. We can hope for better for ourselves, but we need to do everything we're talking about with compassion. Yes. And especially, again, if you've already got control over yourself, if you're an older adult and you're okay, you're not a slave to your device, but your kids are, have compassion for them, because they don't have the willpower that you have. And most people don't, adults or children. Right. So again, compassion, patience, tolerance, but it has to be implemented, these restrictions, these changes, whatever. And by the way, if you're a parent, if a kid's really upset that they're having this ban, or if teachers are being jerks about it or whatever, we talked about this in other podcasts, don't ruin the narrative. Tell the kid, I know you don't like it, etc., but this is necessary. You need to do this. I know you're not going to get it. Maybe you don't like it right now, but trust me, down the road, you're going to realize that this is for your betterment. It's not a punishment.
Yeah. So listeners, what do you think about the cell phone bans? Do you think they're a good thing, a bad thing? Do you agree with what we've said, disagree? Let us know in the comments.
All right. And on that note, until next time, keep your eyes on the road and your hands upon the wheel.